Right, we come to an evening sky, and what we're actually going to do is create this wonderful sunlit glow across the sea in this picture here of Peggy's Cove Lighthouse in Nova Scotia in Canada. And you can see it's the archetypal golden glow of a sky. So without further ado, let's get on and start painting. Right, now you can see that I've mixed together using the cadmium yellow and the yellow ochre as the main colours. I've added a little bit of cadmium red here to give us a nice orange, and I brought in a little bit of the raw umber with the red to give us some of the darker colours we will need for the cloud shadows. But for the most part, we're going to start off with this sort of colour, and you can see I'm deliberately going into the 2 or 3 different shades so that we have something that's not a completely flat colour, but in fact more of a variety of subtle little tones. We're going to have to work quickly because of course the paint does tend to dry. Just bring that down a touch, little crisscross strokes, and then we can go back over into those strokes as we blend the paint. Now you can see I've dragged a little bit of red into this area here, not too much. In fact, I put too much in to start with, and I was happy to quickly get some white and some yellow, cadmium yellow over it before it got out of hand. We'll put a little bit more in as well. What I'm going to do is to bring, while it's still a little bit damp and there's a little bit of wetness in the picture, I want to bring in some little streaky clouds with a little bit of raw umber into the top right hand corner here. If we can just have a look at the photograph for a moment, you can see these little hints of these clouds, either just drifting in or maybe they're just drifting out of the photograph. Now you can see I've just changed the brush for the number 5 filbert. Just gives a slightly rounder sort of effect to the clouds here, and just a little bit more. Just partially blend. You can see the way that's just starting to still blend in there. It's still moist enough to just about blend. It's a bit reluctant, but it will do it if you encourage it. Perhaps just add a little bit more. I've got a fair amount of glaze material in this now, so with this raw umber, so hopefully it feels a little bit more moist than the paint on its own. Right, now you can see that I've continued to streak that with the red and the yellow ochre and the cadmium yellow and the white down to where the horizon is, which is actually just about here. We'll come back to that in a moment, but from now on what I'm going to do in this area here is to just paint a slightly darker yellow ochre and raw umber mix, mostly yellow ochre, and above all I'm keeping the brush strokes reasonably horizontal, and that's because this is the water area and I want to keep that, although it's going to have a reflection on it later on, I want to keep it quite flat and certainly as level as I can. Right, I've put a piece of masking tape across where the horizon will be for the distant shoreline. Again, it doesn't matter what shape this is purely to give us a shape for the distant hills that the sun will be peeping over. Right, now what we're going to do is to get the first rays of the sunlight coming across the water, and we're going to concentrate on this area here eventually because that's where the brightest light will be. But it's important as well to get in a hint of the waves that are a little further away, because they do cast quite a bit of, if you like, sort of subtle sunlight and shadow quite away either side of where the main sunlit area is. And it's just a hint of some gentle waves. You can see just by scraping side to side. that. Now you can see that I've just streaked in with this brush sideways some lighter and darker colour. This is only yellow ochre and a little bit of white, and what I'm just trying to do is to get that effect of the sunlit rays that are just bouncing either side of the what is going to be the main sunlit area. Right, now I'm just painting, if you like, half a sun there. That's just peeping above the distant hills, and that's going to give me the line. We'll come back and do a bit more work on that in a second, but that's going to give me the line for the more obvious sunlit streak. And the important thing about this is, more than anything, is to keep the sunlit area or these reflections absolutely horizontal or vertically below the sun. Doesn't matter what angle you're looking at, they will always appear vertically below the sun to where you're standing. What we can do is actually scrape a little bit of sunlight over the top of that hillside there, so it's a little bit blurred, as if the sun is just bursting over the top of the hillside and just its last few rays are. Now you can see what I'm doing here. I've got paint on the chisel edge of the 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm just pressing down slightly, and that's giving that little extra squelch of paint, if you like, on the canvas panel, but doing it in a nice horizontal manner. Now, following the same principle, we're going to put some darker ripples in, because the waves that are in shadow will be an intense shadow. Right, now you can see I've put some, the same way I'm putting these light streaks back in, I've also put some darker streaks in to give that essential contrast. And to really make that reflection stand out. Okay, we'll do that, we'll leave that for now. We'll now paint in the lighthouse, and when I've painted that, I'll come back and show you how we're going to get the reflection of the sun on the lighthouse. Right, we've painted in a rough outline of the water, the sunlit water, and of the lighthouse. What I want to do now, as that's drying, is to start casting some of the sunlight on the front edge of that. At the moment it's obviously only a silhouette and a little bit of a caricature. So now you can see I'm bringing that colour down, and there's even a little bit of ultramarine in that colour, just to give it the shadow and a little bit of darkness. The next colour we're going to do, this middle section here, will be somewhat lighter, and we'll take that down that central section there, like that. And then in the front panel there's going to be an awful lot of red and yellow and white, as you can see on the brush. And I'm going to bring that down the front like that. You can see I'm still leaving that little edge of the lighthouse because it helps to define it against the light background sky. Right, now you can see I've put that lighter colour. You can see the way that's reflected in the sunlight and these lighter colours here. I'm just now putting a hint on what would be the rocks, particularly around that area there. Obviously that's going to be in shadow. And I think we'll call that it. So there we are. You can see that it's not difficult to create that situation of the sun going down, but remember, it's the reflections you want to create in the water, but also any buildings that are in its light, particularly if they're likely to be a focal point as this lighthouse is, that you need to be aware of the light that's going to be caught by the buildings is going to be exactly the same colours that you use for the sky. So there we are, there's Peggy's Cove Lighthouse at sunset.